Welcome to episode 88. I'm your co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, with the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. And we're back for another episode. This time, not our normal time. It's 10 a.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. in the Netherlands. So we'll get to that briefly. But before we get into it, I'll just quick pause for the sponsor slot.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to give you a word from our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Balance. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Our next sponsor is TradeCentric. TradeCentric transforms the way businesses transact by enabling punch-out, purchase order, and invoice automation solutions for over 3,000 companies around the world. Uniquely positioned at the intersection of e-commerce and e-procurement, TradeCentric helps B2B buyers connect with suppliers and automate payment, procurement processes to drive greater efficiency and user adoption of streamlined systems. Learn more at tradecentric.com. Thank you to our sponsors.
Thanks for tuning in. It's still early in the year, so this will be hopefully a more exciting year than ever before with B2B. We're seeing, definitely a lot more interest in the B2B world. I think people are kind of realizing it's can't kind of do nothing. You got to adapt in B2B commerce. So I'm really excited to introduce my guest. I'll try not to butcher his name. I'm just going to go with the first name. In America, we would go with Peter, but you probably pronounce it slightly different in the Netherlands. Your last name, if you can say for everyone and introduce yourself. I just don't want to butcher it for the guests. So
yeah, no, sure. My name is Peter Jaap Blaakmeer. We say Peter, but actually my first name is Peter.
I was going to go Peter, yeah, but Peter here in America, we kind of go with like the American version is Peter,
Yeah, no, I go by Peter internationally, or PJ, because my first name is the first two parts of my name. So it's actually Peter Jaap is my first name. So I usually go by PJ or Peter. So whatever you feel comfortable with.
And so you're graciously accepting our invite, and we're dealing with the time zone issue. So it's like basically the opposite. I'm starting my day, you're kind of ending your day. You're in the Netherlands. I think we've had one guest in the Netherlands, and I've only been there once. But one thing that's really impressed me is like it's just a very I felt like it's like a mix of a very advanced country, but also has like the farms and the ecological aspects of like localized farming. So you get like a mix of advanced technology and then like the local economy in the same environment. So
yep.
I found that quite interesting. But tell me about yourself. You guys, from what I know, you stay very localized. I mean, your clients do expand, but they're for the most part local. So
yeah, that's right. Actually, I'm a very good combination of how you just described the Netherlands, because my dad was a farmer, so I grew up on a farm. We had a lot of chickens, potatoes, sugar beets, wheat, stuff like that. So we did the local farming and the advanced technology when I was living at home. But yeah,
like you got a computer and then like a chicken like next to each other, right?
Yeah, that was my childhood basically. Yeah, the chicken farm and the computer.
Isn't the Netherlands known for like being one of the largest exporters of food? Like, aren't the Dutch like, it's like a tiny little country population wise, but you guys like export a huge chunk of the food, right? Isn't there? I don't know. I saw some stat on that. I was like kind of crazy. So
yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah. we have a lot of farmers in this small country. So yeah, after I moved to the big city and studied business, and then I started Elgentos, which is my Magento agency. At first as a sideline just to earn some money, but that quickly got out of hand. And now 12 years later, we're here with 20 people, most of them developers, and we're building Magento shops since the beginning. Since we've been doing that for 12 years now, and moved to B2B gradually a bit more. Started in B2C, but luckily most of the clients on B2C shifted away to other platforms.
Like I say, luckily.
Shopify. Yeah, luckily. I don't hate B2C obviously, but it's just a lot more fun to do B2B in especially in Magento, because we do customized implementations, and if you have a run-of-the-mill web shop where you just sell goods you bought somewhere else, then a standard web shop like a Shopify instance would serve you.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, if you have a basic operation, it's kind of a no-brainer to go with Shopify. It's just so easy to use. And then you see BigCommerce kind of being in the middle ground. They're nice, like they're kind of like straddling the Magento world and the Shopify world. So there's this kind of middle ground where we see BigCommerce playing, and then Magento is definitely the most usually complex B2B. But that's where it's funny because they didn't design it originally as a B2Z platform. I was just like you. I started out almost the same exact time. Started mostly in Magento. We were a little different. We've kind of diversified, but we still do Magento. But our Magento practice has become almost exclusively B2B, and our Shopify practice is very much B2C. You know what I mean? Like, so kind of to your point. But when do you think that shift happened? I want to say it was maybe in the last 5-6 years. Like, it was kind of a gradual shift. It didn't happen all at once. You know what I mean?
I think the markets are a bit different because BigCommerce isn't really a thing in Europe. So there's a lot of
I say
middle
in the
ground
UK, it's definitely growing in the UK, but that's about it. Yeah.
But mainland Europe, it's not really a thing. And I'd say Shopify only really got a hold of the European market in the last 2, maybe 3 years. So it's lagging a bit behind what you feel when that happened. And I think that's partly due to Shopify having a terrible multi-language, multi-site setup. It's a kind of one of the prerequisites.
Both BigCommerce and Shopify, frankly, that's been a weakness, is like the multi-language support, international support. So, they built a stronghold in the North America, but it's definitely not as ubiquitous in Europe. Like, we see that for sure. So
no, and that's the main reason why you have to do multiple instances for your other languages and link, and it was terrible. We looked at it at some point, but we love Magento and we love doing the customization work, and we don't do any of the marketing or SEO or SEA or stuff like that. And that's where the heavy lifting in B2C generally happens. Implement a new design, stuff like that, and the whole backend part of it, or adding new features or product configurators, which is one of our fortes. That's just less common in the Shopify world. So we decided to just stay focused on Magento and move with the market a bit more. And you saw that at a certain point, certain companies just decided to do Shopify because they were mainly focused on B2C. So they moved away, and then we filled the void they left with new clients that wanted to do very specific B2B customization implementations in Magento. So we're seeing that part of our business grow a lot faster. The budgets are bigger,
more sticky,
it's more fun.
right? They stay around longer. They don't bounce around as often. I feel like B2C is like they're looking for a new agency every 6 months. It's like they have no patience in B2C. Oh, you didn't get me results in a month? All right, on to the next one. It's like, but in B2B.
And B2B, I like also the general sorry, the general type of companies that are B2B companies are, in our case, usually, family-owned companies that have been
Yes.
doing whatever they do for the past 30 years. So they have like a longer outlook on things.
Yes. They've been through
And
like
they're,
4 recessions, they've
yeah,
seen, like the ups and downs, they were there through 2008, and in our
yeah,
world, 2001 was a little, we had a tech recession. I don't know, you guys have different stuff going on there, but yeah, I agree. It's rare. I find it rare to find a B2B company that was started after 2000. Like,
yeah,
it's like
that
almost
doesn't
all of our
really happen
B2B,
a lot.
yeah, it's like, so tell us a little bit about these kind of companies. They're family owned. Are they generally like distributors, manufacturers? Do you guys focus on an industry? Like, what are
No,
they
we don't
selling?
focus on an industry.
Yeah.
No, it's usually they're manufacturers, so they
Okay.
manufacture a certain kind of product,
Okay.
and they need a specific implementation storefront wise to be able to configure that product the way they can serve the market. So it's usually some kind of product configurator we build for them. So it's a drag and drop kind of thing to compose what they eventually can build on their own premise in their production line. Yeah, so it's well, we have like a company that does carports, or we have a company that does clothing labels. We have a B2B company that doesn't really manufacture their own thing, but they supply tools and all kinds of hardware for companies that build ships. It's
Wow.
it's some of them are I don't know the English word, like wholesalers, and
Yeah, so
some of
we
them
call
are
them
production.
distributors, right? So typically
Yeah,
our B2B customers fall into one of two groups, is like manufacturing, or they make something, maybe they don't make everything, they make half the product, or they make the whole product. And then the rest we kind of call distributors, where they distribute the product, but they're
yeah,
not
yeah,
distributing it to the retailers and the other people that are actually selling it to the end consumer, right? Or selling it to
yeah,
like other businesses that make a product or something like that. So yeah, in our world, in the US, we kind of call it manufacturers and distributors. So yeah, I kind of
yeah.
figured that was the case. Occasionally you have some outlier retail people that also do B2B, and there's some weird use cases, but you know,
Yeah, there are some other models that we run into, some very specific ones. But I'd say generally it's manufacturers. I think we have more manufacturers than distributors at this point.
yeah.
But that's we're trying to focus on our product configurator capabilities to build those out, and you'll attract more manufacturers that way. Because the stuff you implement for a manufacturer is a little bit different than for a distributor.
And you
For a
find that this
distributor,
is usually beyond like a configurable product or a bundled product, or
oh
like
yeah, no, these are completely configurable product configurators. Like we built
yeah.
them
Can you
in
give an
React.
example of like something that's fairly complex or
Yeah, we have a client. They're called Dutch Label Shop, and they create clothing labels, like the stuff that goes into your shirt
yeah,
or your
yeah.
neck. And so you can configure those with your own name and with a
So
symbol.
like
And then we
engraving
have
and yeah, all that kind of
well,
stuff.
they do. I think it's embroidery, and
Embroidery,
they
yeah,
weave them, so it's
yeah,
woven labels.
yeah.
And we built a configurator, product configurator for them, completely custom in React, where you can sort of inline edit the label and pick colors
Do
and
you
pick
see it? Like you
fonts.
can see it as you're
Yeah,
doing it, so you can kind of like see what
yeah,
you're doing. Yeah. Yeah, we've done
exactly.
stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah. I think people underestimate how much more complex something like that is.
that's so complex. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
the pricing mechanism behind that,
Oh
because
yeah. Don't get me started. I got a
like
custom furniture client. It's tough, man.
yeah, the first time we had this client, they said, "Well, we have a kind of complex pricing mechanism." We were like, "Oh man, we've seen so much different pricing
Yeah, then
mechanisms.
you get into it and you're like,
Bring it."
oh boy, this is
And
harder
then
than I
they came
thought.
with
Yeah.
like 120 meg Excel file, which
Yeah.
contained all these
Yep. We
formulas.
saw
We're
the
like,
same
"Oh,
thing.
okay."
Yeah. So let's get into that, because I think that's one of the things that people underestimate with B2B, is that all of a sudden, it's very ERP centric. So like, I don't know if, at least in the US, what we see is a lot of these people, they built up around NetSuite, or, maybe in your world, it's SAP or some of these other, there's a lot of Sage, I think, is like a European company. So they built up these back office processes, and that's where some of that configurator and pricing lives.
And that has legacy of the past 30 years in them.
Yes.
And then you need to.
And it's not the way Magento
system.
works, right? Like that's
No.
people kind of underestimate, is like they have these processes, right? And it works for them, right? Well, you call in, they can log into their system and they can process the order, or they can manufacture it based on their system, but it's their system. Like, it's not viewed in the world. I think that's what people are kind of underestimating, is like, these systems were designed for the operators of those systems, not for a customer to buy on those systems. So then you
this
try
is
and
also
take
one
that,
of the
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Now, this is also one of the things B2B versus B2C is where, especially where I would say the younger companies are the B2C ones and the older companies are the B2B ones. You either mold the process around the software, or you mold the software around the process. And where in B2B, you usually take off-the-shelf software like Shopify, and they'll just say, okay,
B2C,
we'll do our process to fit however Shopify wants it. That's more B2C because they're flexible, and
it's more marketing driven, right? Like, they're more focused on the consumer and the marketing and the trends. Clothes that are cool last year aren't cool this year. It changes very fast. It's like very marketing.
So they're used to adapting the way they work to fit the software they get off the shelf. And then you have these 30-year-old family companies that have done things the way they've done it for the past 30 years. And then they come to us and they're like, but this is our ERP, which is still running in DOS, but we still wanted to connect it to Magento. So you need to, mold the software to fit the process.
Not just that, they're like, we customized it over like 20 years. It has like 1,000 custom tables and modules, and I think
the guy who did it is now 85, and he
or he's gone. I mean, I have a deal that I'm working on with a distributor, and he can't like give me any clarity on who runs the operations. I'm like, I can't help you because I'm not like, I don't want to be responsible for like the orders coming in and like, split orders, because like some orders might go to them, and so, like, I was like, someone needs to take ownership.
There's no documentation. You have to
I was like, I can build you the experience.
Find the people that know it.
No,
that's on the one hand, it's intimidating. On the other hand, it's a challenge we sometimes like to take on, but sometimes it's just too convoluted, and
you got to pick your battles, right? Like, you gotta sometimes say no. So I mean, I think we agree that these like legacy systems are one of the big challenges. And so
and that's, well, you just said like ERP wise that you named a few, and SAP is SAP is a big company here and a lot of people use it, but
they're German, right? So they're German.
But still, I haven't run into SAP more than twice in the past.
So what do you run into? Like, is it older stuff?
It's all over the place. Like, I feel like every industry has their own specific ERP. And since we don't focus on a certain industry, because we have like a
deal with everything.
Where we don't serve customers in the same industry, don't serve two of the same customers in the same industry. So we always run into some ERP we've never heard of.
So how do you deal with that? Do you guys custom integrate, or do you deal with like we work a lot with Soligo. There's other, there's like these iPaaS solutions like Workato and these middlewares. And then you have like, I met a guy in Europe who has an amazing connector, but it's only for one ERP. Like, it was amazing. He did exactly what I was hoping for, because I actually did the same thing for a different ERP. But it's great only if you're using that ERP. So I'm like, well, that's not going to help me unless they're using that version,
It's all over the place. It's sometimes we get an off-the-shelf connector from somewhere, and then usually it doesn't do what we want, and we still have to modify it. But we'll kickstart the process a bit that way. Other times we often write a complete implementation ourselves.
Sometimes you just have to, right? Like, there's just no way around it, right? I mean, you kind of have to, right?
And it's abstracting away the generic parts that might be reusable for another ERP system. Doesn't always work, because
Yeah.
it's just, the one ERP works with XML, the other uses a REST API.
Yeah,
And
or EDI.
we
I mean,
even
some of
have
these guys, they
one
want to
where,
do only EDI, right? A lot electronic data.
yeah, well, EDI, what the hell is EDI?
Well, yeah, it's not
just
really EDI,
generic term for,
but you know what I
it's
mean?
like
Like,
EDI is like OCI. Like, oh
yeah.
yeah, we have an OCI connector. Yeah, which one of the 30 bazillion?
Yeah, well, that's the funny
OCI
thing. The one I
connectors?
was talking about earlier, he's like, yeah, we can do EDI. I'm like, okay, but I don't know if that's going to
Okay.
be 30 grand
You know,
or 100 grand to connect. You
exactly.
know what I mean? Like,
if I generate a CSV file here, put it on a USB stick, and send it to you in an envelope, that's also an electronic data interchange. It's a nonsensical term.
in America, it'll get here maybe in 14 days, but it might just get lost in the mail because our post office is like always going bankrupt every.
But that's that exactly. And we have, oh yeah, this is EDI compliant, or this is OCI compliant. It's like, oh yeah, okay, great, but this is just some term. Well, OCI is actually a standard, where EDI has different standards. But
I want to get deeper into this a little bit. So, are just off the cuff, are there any good connectors? Just anyone that and I know it's not anecdotal. I know it's not always perfect, but like, is there anyone out there that you're like, these guys did pretty good? I know the Magento world. There's some people that you use the off the shelf and you're like, I'm never using that again. You know what I mean, right? Like there's some extensions. Like I'll never touch that again. But is there anyone that like just you're like, these guys are doing a good job, maybe it won't work for everyone.
I'd say, yeah. Well, if we're talking about generic, then I'd say if somebody's interested, that you could take a look at Illumio. We're looking at that right now for a project. It's also built by a Dutch company.
I feel like I've heard of them. How do you spell it?
Alumio. And it's like it's Zapier on steroids. Alumio.
Illumio. Okay. Sounds very familiar. Yeah. Okay.
It's like Zapier on steroids, but they have, Zapier has it on a trigger, and then they have a webhook basically, and they have like a data stream pipeline bandwidth thing going on.
Yeah. So this is similar to like Celigo. So you know what it is? I mean, this market is so big. You guys have like the European version of the same thing that we have. So we kind of, we have our biases with like the American versions of the, they're probably very similar. Sure. There's another one called Workato and Jitterbit. It looks like they do a lot with SAP and Microsoft Dynamics.
Microsoft Dynamics and the Vision are also ERPs we encounter a lot here in Europe.
Is there anything? What you said? There's so many, but is there like what is the most common if you had to pick? Like, and I know it's not.
I'd say Microsoft Dynamics.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean Microsoft's an American company, obviously, and then SAP is right by you. But somehow Microsoft has taken more of the market.
I think that's also, SAP gets more prevalent the more you go up market.
Yeah. We see that too. Like you got to be massive to justify it.
And the European Magento market is also different than the US Magento market. Like big Magento shops in Europe are, really big ones are 50 million to 100 million. I think it maxes out around that volume in Europe usually.
You mean
so
in
we're
terms
smaller
of the size of the business or the
in size of GMV? No, in size of GMV.
Okay. And what do you see them going to? Like, if they're bigger than that, are they custom? Are they, with the Hybris or Salesforce, or what are they?
Hybris, Demandware, but I think that's Salesforce
it's
now.
Salesforce
right?
now.
Yeah,
so let's be honest. I mean, at what point do you feel? I feel like Hybris is gonna die. Like, I don't know anyone that's like, oh yeah, we're going to Hybris. We support Hybris. Like, I feel like it's still there and it's still used by these big shops, but it's only because they're just frankly too lazy to get off of it. It's a big, probably a $2 million project. Like if you're doing 200 million on Hybris, it's probably like a $3 million project to get off it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd
say
that.
I mean, I just don't see anyone going to that platform. Like,
and where would you go? It's Hybris, Demandware, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And then
but I feel like even when Salesforce is more of a B2C platform, like I just don't see them really solving the B2B world that well. you know.
No, I think it's more that they do these giant back office integrations with
Well, they have
all the
Salesforce, right? They
software.
have they have
Yeah.
SAP,
Okay. Now.
right?
Yeah.
Hybris is
Yeah.
SAP, so you have SAP, you know.
Yeah. Well, we have Intershop here as well. I know they do a
Yeah.
lot of implementations with a lot of ERPs that are used by large chains or franchise
Yeah.
companies. So they target that specific market a lot. But above Magento, like 100 million plus, we hear Spryker sometimes,
Yeah.
commerce tools.
I
And
also think
stuff
you're
like
getting
that.
into the custom world at that point. Like I honestly believe
Yeah.
when you're starting to get into that size, it's like you probably could build something custom for the cost of like because you're gonna end up customizing the platform so much. It's like
Mhm.
what does the platform end up being at that point? You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't serve that market, obviously. So
Yeah.
we generally serve. We're a local company. We work a lot for local companies. So
Yeah.
the scale doesn't get outrageous. We're
Yeah.
we're usually between 5 and 30 million GMV for
Yeah.
what our clients do.
So when you say 5 and 30 million GMV, they're typically old school ERP stuff, but maybe they've upgraded. And then, but I assume they're doing a
Yeah.
lot offline. So let's talk about that because the biggest challenge we see in the US, I'm curious if like, you guys are ahead or you see this, maybe you guys are a little bit more open-minded. We feel like a lot of the B2B companies that I encounter, they're just like, oh, people call in, like they're very resistant to like changing processes and bringing, like they might do 100 million on the phone or email or whatever EDI,
Mhm.
but only 5 million on the website. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
only like
Yeah.
5 on the website. And are you seeing that? And then it's kind of this like cultural problem to get them to like switch to the website,
I think it's usually the other way around here. They come to us and they need a website because the people that purchase from them say we want to purchase through the website and we want to stop purchasing through the phone.
Really?
So yeah, so instead of where the merchant tries to bring the client onto the digital platform because it's easier for them, it's usually the customers that want the merchant to go digital.
So I think and here's a theory. I think in the US there's some of that happening, but the B2B companies are so far removed from what their customers actually want that they just don't even realize that they want that in some cases. And the sales
But
rep,
that's weird, right? Because we see a lot of these companies that they hire new procurement uh, employees. So they hire someone that does procurement, and they're, I don't know, 25, 30, and then they come into the company. They're like, what? I have to call this company to place an order. Can't I just do it through their website?
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Because they're
But you
so used to
also you
doing
have
that
this
in their
crazy
private
large
life.
market in the US where like there are people that are 65 years old running a lumber yard and they're okay with calling, right? And so like I think
Yeah.
that they don't even realize they're losing those opportunities and those, millennials is the buzzword here that is
Hmm.
doing that. And they're just like, whatever, we'll just keep selling to the,
Yeah.
older people that
It
will call
depends on the business you're
in.
in. We do
Exactly.
have a client that deals a lot with the 60-year-olds that want to call in. So you'd have to find a flow where the person that picks up the phone is able to place the order under their name. But I think one thing that is in our favor in Europe is that we've never done things like credit cards much. So that somebody places
So
an
you can't
order over
call
the
in and put your
phone.
credit card over the phone like that.
No,
Yeah.
that's no, that's not a thing here. So usually they call in, they're like, "Hey, I want to place an order. Sure, what's this? Okay, I'll put it in the cart for you, and you'll get a link to pay for it." So
So they're kind of like
the last
already
part of it,
trained to do it a little bit online, kind of in a way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
See, we
So
don't
it's
have
more
that,
just
right? Because
filling the cart is the main thing.
well, so I think here what the reason it's been so hard to adapt is because here is very purchase order driven. So it's very procurement purchase order driven in that they say, look, I want 10,000 of this. The sales rep helps them, and then they just like basically say, hey, take my order of 10,000, and then they get an invoice, but they don't have to pay that invoice for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. So like there's kind of like this like private credit system. I mean, we have it in our own business at Trellis, where like the B2B businesses in the US operate basically on their own credit goodwill system, which is I bet you the vast majority of B2B transactions are not paid on receipt. So like they might even be taking the goods before they've paid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think that happens here as well, definitely. But I think less, because we're less accustomed to debt in that way, especially credit card type debt. And there's a really ingrained mentality, especially in the Netherlands, like pay it forward.
Pay your bills, don't be overdue. It's
pay it up front. So that I think
we
that
do not have that.
into...
That's the problem. We have like the opposite. So like one of the things that I think is actually holding back the US market in B2B is net terms. So I've been trying to push people to build that into their ecom platform. But the problem is, as you know, Magento and whatever it is, whether it's Magento, none of the platforms are very great at like purchase order, net terms. Like that flow isn't very good. You could do it, right? Like you can, but it wasn't really built for that. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
No, we never do invoicing from Magento, basically.
Yeah.
That's
well, so it's not that it would be invoicing
clients who were invoicing through ERP or something.
But the problem, so we do that too, but it's the problem is they still have to transact online, and then it needs to like ping the ERP to send an invoice. Like there needs to be this kind of like workflow, and you can see how that can get complicated pretty fast if you're trying to like make that all work. You know, through the online.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
I feel like net was like payment terms, like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. I think that's less of a variable here. I think 30 days is the standard. I haven't really encountered a lot of other terms in length of days. Usually it's we do 14.
I mean, we have a customer that forces us to do 45 days. Like that's their big company, and it's just like, you want to work with us?
Yeah.
45 days. Like that's it.
Yeah,
like,
no, we do it the other way around. You want to work with us, it's 14. So
yeah. You could do that, right? But some of these big companies, they're just like designed. They have so much buying power that they kind of call the shots, right? So, I think that's a big challenge here in the U.S. And there's some companies, Balance is actually our sponsor, and they handle like kind of B2B payments, and net terms and things like that. So it's interesting to hear that that's not as big of a problem that you guys encounter. What about the sales? So the other counter problem, I think, is that we have like a very ingrained B2B sales rep culture. And so like, when you're a B2B company and your business is kind of driven by sales reps, because let's say your sales, I talked to one company, it's like their sales reps are doing millions of dollars. I think they said their sales reps did 2.7 billion in B2B sales. Wow. It's like, okay, how do you bring that online and get the sales reps to adapt to now it going through online? You know what I mean? Like, that's a huge challenge that we encounter. Like, we can make you the coolest thing in the world, but if your sales reps don't, if the culture doesn't like adapt to it, doesn't matter, right? Like I could build you Amazon and it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, but they can still do their thing, but you have to put it in the system somewhere that you were the sales rep that talked to that client.
Yeah, and that's what I recommend, right? Like keep a record that every customer should be attached to a sales rep, even if they didn't.
Yeah, like we hook up HubSpot, and they do their outbound calls through HubSpot, and HubSpot will log the calls to a specific company. We get the address, and then we match it on postcode and house number, because that's usually a very specific, foolproof way to match an incoming order with an outgoing call. So if the order gets placed in the web shop later on, it will automatically get attached to that sales rep that did the call for that company.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the challenge, right? Is you have these different systems, right? And you have just even the concept of companies, right? So Magento didn't natively have companies, right? So now you have like the B2B module or the enterprise version, but then if you're on open source, you don't have that. So you have to kind of like figure out how to create companies in open source, or, there's modules, right? There's extensions. And then
Definitely. Yeah.
HubSpot has its own way of companies, Magento has its own way of companies, and then the ERP is going to have its own way of companies. And then now you're going to make all these
Yeah.
things work, right? And so I think
That's the puzzle we like to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the problems. Tell me like some success stories, like where you're like, you know what, this just like we crushed it with these guys. I'm sure we could talk about failures all day because it's Magento, and I feel like there's more failures than success sometimes in the Magento world. But
Yeah.
our Magento business just taking over failed projects from other agencies. But tell me about the successes where you were like really proud of, like, wow, we just like took this family business, we got them all online, they're doing really well. Is there a story that comes to mind?
Yeah, we had a client here in the north of Netherlands that sells like hardware. Usually, it's their distributor, and they were running an open cart for years.
Oh God. I think I did. So when I, just like you, I started out, I was like I tried everything, right? And then I realized Magento was better, right? So
Yeah. Well, open cart was actually one of the better ones. Always felt like it was like kind of a Magento light.
It was Magento Light in like 2012, 2011. But I mean, you kind of get to a certain point where like, do you want Magento Light, or you just might as well just do Magento? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like...
exactly. Yeah. No, so this client, actually the CTO built it himself over the years, and it worked, but it was still old open cart.
Yeah.
So we needed to migrate that to Magento, and we did this whole product discovery where we look like, okay, what do you want to do? What B2B features do you need? How can we supply you with that? Do we need Adobe Commerce with the B2B module, or can we do this for you in a better way with Magento open source? So first they were kind of set on doing Adobe Commerce, but we generally try to steer clients away from Adobe Commerce because we don't think it adds too much value, or any at all sometimes.
The
On
licensing
wishes.
can get really expensive, and then you have a lot of overhead. So you guys typically go with open source then?
Always, yeah.
What do you do for company accounts though? Sorry, I know we're kind of digressing, but what do you typically do for like B2B and company accounts? Do you have your own module, or you build the module?
No, we use the Mage Plaza B2B suite.
Okay.
Generally,
You've been pretty happy with them?
Pretty good quality. Yeah, we're pretty happy with them. They have Hoover support, so we do.
Where are they based out of? Mage Plaza? I feel like they're...
I have no idea.
Honestly,
Vietnam, I guess.
They might be Indian, in India, but sorry, continue. So this company's on open cart. I'm assuming they've customized the hell out of this thing.
Yeah,
right. Like
different microservices will actually separate PHP files and separate VPSs, and it all worked together.
At least it's like PHP, so you're talking the same world, open cart Magento. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we could look in the old source code to see what was going on, and we could read it and then port it to Magento. And they worked along with us as well, because they're also pretty technical. So that was cool.
So they appreciated you, they understood you, and
yeah. No, that was a cool project. It was one of our first Hoover builds. And that was also with the Mage Plaza B2B one. So we did a lot of compatibility modules for Hoover for the Mage Plaza.
Hoover's like Tailwind CSS. It's like more modern front end, right? For people
it replaces the Luma, old deprecated Luma front end, so you can build modern web shops without having to do a complex, overly costly, useless PWA.
But it's not React, right? You don't have to deal with all the PWA headaches, right?
No. That's the main attraction.
It's just basically like fixing the kind of like old Magento front end. Yeah.
It's the front end Magento should have. It's this is what the successor of Luma should have been, coming from Magento themselves.
Yeah, the problem is all the extension compatibility. It's getting better, right? But still, not everything's compatible.
Not everything, but a lot of extension vendors are supporting Hoover now, and it's actually pretty easy to create these compatibility modules. It's usually only you have to replace CSS with Tailwind classes, and you have to
Well,
rewrite
not
the
every module is
Wire.js
front
to
end,
knock out.
right? So if it's a back end module, it's not even.
Yeah, exactly.
you know.
That's funny because you see extension vendors now selling a backend module, and then it says Hoover compatible.
Yeah, it's like you didn't
that
do
was the
anything.
easy
You
one.
just wrote that. You're just lying.
Yeah, you just put the sticker
we
on
know
it.
what you're doing. We know what you're doing. So okay, so you went with Hoover, the B2B modules, open source. What about their backend? Like, what were what was the ERP? What was the?
Well, it's called Carriage. It's just
Never
one
heard
of
of
those
it.
industry specific. No, me neither. It's one of those industry specific ERPs that have been around for decades, and we run into these all the time. Like we had one for the bicycle industry, and we had one for the print industry. It's like every industry has their own.
Especially in manufacturing, right? Because in manufacturing, the process could be so complex. They have this software that like just does their process. You know what I mean? Like
and then it hooks into stuff like AutoCAD that generates a bill of materials.
I mean, then you're talking a whole nother level. Yeah, it's like
yeah. So we wrote a custom connector for that ERP. It was in this case it was fairly easy. There was no two-way communication. We just push an order there, and then that's about it. Other clients and stuff.
So the connector was fairly simple. The integration was fairly simple in that case.
Yeah.
But what made it successful? So you got them off OpenCart, you migrated them to Magento, which I think is generally a better platform than OpenCart. Hoover, better front, like you modernized. But what, aside from just kind of upgrading, what do you feel like made it so successful versus like another project where maybe you did something similar?
Well, the client was really happy with it.
But why? Why did they appreciate what you guys did versus you? Because I've done this, right? Like because I've been in a situation where it's like you did the same thing for two different clients. One hates you, one loves you. Like, why did they? You know what I mean, right?
I think a large part of it is that the client was technical itself, so they know how hard certain things are, and so when you deliver it in the way they envisioned it, that's you get a lot of appreciation for that. So that what makes it successful. And we put a bunch of B2B functionality in there that they didn't have previously, and they do have now. Stuff like where you have a company account, you have a purchase or a sales rep in there, and you have a budget limit. Where somebody can order, and then if they reach the budget, then the person above them gets an email like, "Hey, are you okay by approving this order?"
Cool, right? So that their procurement people can't run wild and buy like unlimited. They have to like go up the chain. Yeah.
Cool. They have a certain budget and it resets like every month. And if they go above it, then their manager gets an email. And it's like little B2B functions, quick orders, stuff like that they didn't have.
So a lot of like B2B nuances you guys kind of added to the platform. You still maintain it? You still work with them today, or?
Definitely. Yeah. We do. We try to keep around our clients as long as possible. Because that's just if you have a good working relationship, that's also
they understand the value of kind of incremental improvements. I think sometimes people kind of struggle with that, and they think like trying to cram everything into the project, and then
and that's it's tough with usually we're a Magento agency, so usually we have like free ways people become a client with us. The biggest one, like 80% of our business comes from existing Magento 2 sites that switch agencies. That's like the majority of our clients. And then we have like a slightly smaller piece where they come to us and they want to migrate an existing site, either from Magento 1 or Shopify, or they want to upgrade, or they want to upgrade from Adobe eCommerce to Magento open source. Or so whatever. So migrations, I think that's like 15% or even more. And then a few percent are like the completely new builds. Like we don't have anything. Clean slate, build it for us. And
pretty rare. It happens. Yeah. Gotcha.
So the migrations are always actually the hardest, because it's also a new build, but you have to also take into account the existing data. So you have to wrangle that into the Magento system. So a new build is actually easier than a migration because you don't have to care about.
You don't have to retrofit. I think also people always assume that you just know everything about their old website, They're like, oh,
Mhm.
we built this site over 10 years, but like, why don't you just know
Please
everything
copy
we
this.
do? Why don't you know all our
Yeah.
pricing? It's like, we're not, we can't have 3 conversations and know like 20 years of business history. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. We still have that, a year down the line, they're like, oh yeah, we had this in our previous site. It's like, oh, it's not in the RFP. Well, we kind of forgot it happened because it
it's
happened
your fault.
automatically.
It's your
Yeah, it's like, how
fault.
were we supposed to know this process was running,
I've heard the Dutch are very upfront, so that might be an advantage you guys have, as people are very just like transparent in there. They're not holding anything back. I feel like here we don't get as much of that though.
Yeah, how come? How does that translate to the US? What would happen
Yeah, I
if
don't
there's
know.
a
I
big-
think there's a lot more politics in business here, where like sometimes you don't know if they're trying to please their boss, or they have ulterior motives, or they're
Right.
like, you don't know the real story sometimes of what they're actually trying to do. Like if they're, I just feel like there's kind of this different game here that sometimes, like, I've just heard that you guys are much more like, here's the real story, here's the honest truth, and if you don't like it,
I think so. Yeah, we never run into politics in business. That's no.
yeah, we see that. So like
Not something I'd
different
recognize.
departments not getting along, so they have to like yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But we conscientiously try to avoid like big companies with multiple departments, and we like to work with. We used to say we like to work with the founder owner himself or herself directly. Now we say, okay, we do need an e-commerce manager in between. But if
You still want to
if the
talk to the owner,
giant,
right? Yeah, you still want to.
yeah, and if there are multiple departments, or the company is owned by an investment company and there's a board of directors, and usually that's one a little bit too big for us, and
Yeah.
that's a different way of working that we don't really like. We're a small company. We have our developers talk to our clients directly. Our project managers aren't in between a lot. Short lines, quick communication. So the bigger the company, the less we like to work with them, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So tell me a little bit about the company's success. So like you mentioned that this company, that maybe they're more technical, and I think that helps, right? Because they understood, they appreciated, they valued what you guys are doing. Do you feel like that's like a culture, like, when the CEO is involved and kind of gets it, that's more successful? Or where like, do you ever see where like the CEO is like, hey, guy, go figure it out, and they're just like, they think they just kind of like assume some guy's going to go figure it out, and then those are harder?
Yeah. It's, as an agency owner, you from time to time have some difficult conversations with customers, and the most difficult ones are usually with the clients, where the owner doesn't grasp the underlying mechanics of custom software like we do.
Yeah.
So if there's a CTO you work with at the other side of the company, or the owner that's technically inclined, then it's a lot easier to explain why a certain bug you couldn't, forecast how many hours you needed to fix it. And you quickly run
that's a
into
common
the
Magento
comparison
problem.
with an,
Yeah.
well, not only Magento, but it's, there's something isn't working. How many hours do you think you
Bugs,
need
it's
to
like we
fix it?
can't.
Well, if I knew that,
You'd fix the bug
then
immediately. Yeah, it's like, I think people
yeah,
don't realize is that the actual fixing of the bug is usually fairly easy. It's figuring out what the bug is and what's causing it that's usually the most of the time,
yeah,
And it's almost
definitely.
impossible to estimate that accurately.
Yeah.
You can kind of guess, it might be 2 to 5 hours, but sometimes it just gets, might be more, it could be way more.
Sometimes you get into the weeds, and or you do fix the bug, but it's part of a bigger problem.
Yeah, I
Needs
think
like
also people
don't
realize that there's just so many moving parts, right? You have hosting, so you have, AWS or whatever hosting company, and then that could be causing issues. We see issues with Elasticsearch, and some, if you have Elasticsearch Cloud, we had a client that was down, and it was because they had bought the cheapest version of Elasticsearch Cloud, and their site was like way too big and it's like, guys, we need to upgrade this. Like, you know, and
Mhm.
then we'll get blamed, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, eventually the agency gets blamed, and then it's our job to explain what happens. And if the other person isn't that technical and they just, it's not their fault. They're in a different industry. They're better at other things, but you still want to explain why stuff happens. And if it's just too complex, because you're talking about elastic cloud and instances and RAM space that gets filled up and whatever, too many buzzwords for them, and then they lose track, and then
caching, it was crashing, it
yeah.
was overloading the cache because it was like maxing out. It just gets pretty
Yeah, and
complex,
then they
right?
try
Like,
to make it like easier by making a comparison to an auto mechanic or something, car mechanic,
there's just
and
no
they're
easy
like, yeah,
comparison.
that that,
Yeah.
that, that
It's,
comparison doesn't fly,
it's
so
kind of like
yeah,
a
that's right.
house, but way more complicated than a house.
Yeah,
I have a side
yeah,
business, real estate, and there's some complex stuff, but some of it's, it's just not the same. So, and also
yeah,
it moves at like 20 times the slowness, right? Like your roof takes 30 years to fail, where in software it's like in 3 years, that's the 30 years. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah.
sorry, I think there's also a cultural challenge here in the US with B2B where like, and not just B2B, but e-commerce and just agencies where there's just a lack of trust. I don't know if you guys see that, but I think that because we have so much, there are just so many US agencies, so many different people trying to sell them stuff. They get sold on the wrong platform, the wrong agency, the projects, people have gone through so
Mhm.
many problems that they just like, you can give them that explanation and they just like don't believe you. You know what I mean? It's like
Mhm.
there's a saying in America where like people don't trust their car mechanics because they're like, oh yeah, it's $1,000, but they don't know. So like, I think there's just a lot of
Yeah.
mistrust in the US with vendors, especially when it's things that they don't understand, because like you could just be making up a number. And I think that causes a lot of problems in our industry. I'm just curious if you see that in
Yeah.
your industry or your part of the world.
Yes and no. I mean, our work is based on trust.
Yeah.
It's okay. So it depends on also what model you adhere to. So we do just we bill the hour transparently.
Yeah. We do
There's
exactly the
no,
same. We do
yeah.
exactly the same.
So
Yeah.
there are no fixed fees. We try to forecast how long it will take, but sometimes we just don't know, and then the client just has to trust us that we
Yeah.
do our best to fix it as soon as
Yeah.
possible in the most efficient way as possible. And if that trust isn't there, then it's better to call it quits and
Yeah.
go our separate
So is
ways.
that typically what you have to do if you just feel like, look, guys, we've tried, we're trying to like, they just don't trust you. Like, look, we got to part ways because there's
Yeah,
no trust here.
there's so much work in in the whole Magento scene, and we are only scratching the surface because we only do, or almost only do, locally. So we have a lot of clients like in 100-kilometer range, the majority of our clients, and there's so much work going around. So if a client loses trust in us or the other way around, sometimes you just have to cut the cord and say, okay, this isn't going to work out, and we need to find our separate ways. And so trust is a large part of it. Um,
What
yeah,
do you think
you know,
helps gain trust? I mean, because we were pretty transparent. We show the hours. I think it helps, but
mhm.
sometimes I feel like it's just hard to
Now,
gain trust.
it's just constant communication.
Yeah.
That's the only real thing to build trust. Let them know. Like we do a sprint, so every two weeks we communicate. We do a sprint call with the project owner. And that's bare minimum for the majority of our clients. Our developers talk to the project manager or the e-commerce manager on the other side like almost daily. Um, so there's constant communication going on, and as long as you keep the communication going on, you explain what you're doing, what you're running into, why things take longer, but also share when stuff takes less time than
Yeah.
you
Show the
thought it did.
wins, the good and the bad and everything. And yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just keep the communication lines open, be honest and transparent, and if it still doesn't work out, then we've done everything we could do, and then it's just the time to go our separate ways. And that happens. Not every client is a perfect match for us,
Yeah. So we're running out of
and
time,
vice
but
versa.
tell me, really appreciate all your insight. Tell me, what would you kind of leave, the listeners with if, just I know it's hard. Every advice in B2B, it's like, it's really hard to
Blanket
have
statement.
generic advice because like, it's just so nuanced to their situation. But what kind of advice would you give for an owner or someone trying to kind of get better at B2B commerce?
Whew, that's a hard one. You mean the merchant?
Yeah, merchant, like,
Merchant.
regardless of their position, e-com manager, CTO, owner.
No, where we've seen, I think the largest revenue increase for our B2B clients is where the owner, the founder of our merchant identified the single point with their strong point. Like, we can sell this product in a 5 meter length, whatever, or less than 1 meter, whereas other companies can't do that. And so that's their strong point because they have machines that can do that, or they have people that can do that.
Yeah,
And
so they
translating
find
that to an
one
online
thing that's like,
proposition.
they find that one thing that's really hard for anyone else to do well, or maybe no one else can do.
Yeah. And then hire us to bring that into an online proposition where you can, use the online advantage of getting that USP out to the world. I think that's I can't really say specific examples.
No,
but
that's perfect. That's perfect.
In
I want to
general,
distill that just
that's
real quick. That's perfect. Would you say that it's almost more important to distill and focus on that than try and do everything well online, that maybe some of those other things are just not that
the worst projects we've seen come by here are the ones where the owner wants to do as much as possible. Like, can we also implement or can we also import 80,000 of these products from this industry?
Only
because our PIM
1,000
supplies it.
Yeah, it's like, exactly.
Like, you're not Amazon. Don't go into the long tail, please. Stick to your core.
So get really focused on that core couple things that you do really well and just nail that. Basically. Yeah. No, that was amazing. I love that. Really appreciate it. And we'll have to have you back on. I mean, probably in a year. It'll be a whole new world.
I'd love to. Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I've heard you
Please
on
keep
Mate Stock
sharing
as well.
it.
And
we don't have a lot of money.
Our agencies have a lot of things in common. So
we're just trying to get the word out, and it's kind of grassroots effort, right? Like, we don't have some big, budget to run this. It's just kind of like our time,
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Isaiah. Talk to you later.